I think one of the first things that I thought when I heard the news that Robin Williams had died was I was struck by the idea that he'd always previously been around. You know, I don't remember a time in my life when I didn't know who Robin Williams was. You know, he would crop up on Sesame Street. He was on Mork and Mindy, of course. So he was this kind of always present comic figure. And I think his style of comedy particularly speaks to young children because it is so manic and harebrained. I think he kind of won his fans at a very early age, and he'd been doing that for years and years and years. You know, Mork and Mindy was just the ideal showcase for kind of launching this comic talent. And of course, you know, you can't imagine anyone making a better job of the Popeye role than Williams, because he has that sort of cartoonish persona. He can screw up his face and, you know, take up these bizarre postures that really only animators can normally twist the human body into. And of course, he had the voice down completely pat. It was absolutely perfect. So in doing that, I remember seeing the Altman film when I was a kid. It was always on TV during the holidays. It was one of those films. And just being kind of incredibly impressed by the fact that this guy had captured a cartoon character that I loved in live action. I've also been slightly unnerved by it, and there being something very odd about this guy and his ability to sort of channel that kind of animated energy into a live action performance. And, you know, once you've seen that, particularly as a child, but I think at any age, you don't forget it. You remember that this is someone that's going to be worth paying attention to. And then, you know, so when he crops up again and again, of course, in the years after Popeye, Good Morning Vietnam, and then moving on to Dead Poets Society, and finally Good Will Hunting when he finally won the Oscar. You know, those were roles that, you know, from there went on to establish him as more of a credible, serious acting talent as well as a brilliant comic. I think when you talk about Williams' defining role, I think the correct answer is Good Will Hunting, because that was the one, of course. He won the Oscar for that part. He was incredibly funny in it, but there was also a real kind of a humanity to it as well that always shone through in his best work. I think of his later roles, the absolute best of the best was a film he made with Bobcat Goldthwait called The World's Greatest Dad. And it's an incredibly bleak comedy about a high school teacher and a failed novelist whose son dies in incredibly grim circumstances. And he decides, you know, he's trying to make it for the best. So he sort of stages his son's suicide. And it is a role that could be very, very, very easily got wrong. And there are so many ways in which this film could have sat wrong, and the whole thing could have come crashing down, and it didn't. And for me, you know, Williams holds his nerve absolutely to the very end. It's got a glorious final sequence. For me, that is kind of Robin Williams at his serious best. And, you know, the one thing I would urge anyone to do who hasn't seen World's Greatest Dad is to seek it out and see really the kind of the power and the complexity of his acting in that film, because it's not something we necessarily associate with him, but it was something he was great at.